Morning, Miguel. Would you like to do a mic check?
Sure. Good morning. Can you hear me?
I sure can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. This is a courtesy announcement that this meeting is now broadcast live on YouTube and our web portal.
Good morning, Jean.
Good morning.
And good morning, James.
Good morning.
Good morning, Jackie. Would you like to do a mic check?
Good morning.
We hear you loud and clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
And good morning, Supervisor Lee.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Supervisor Simidian.
Good morning, and who's helping today?
Your clerk today is Jess Jameson.
Thank you, Ms. Jameson. And let's see, I think we are a few minutes away. Is Supervisor, there he is, there's Supervisor Lee when the moment arrives. Morning, Otto.
Good morning.
Otto, I'm gonna, at some point here when we go live, I will indicate that on the three substantive items, which are the reports for items 4, 5, and 6, that I will turn to you first for any comments or questions you have. And I just didn't want that to surprise you, if that's okay with you.
I'm ready for my questions, so yeah, that's
Good.
fine.
All right, thank you very much. We'll now just wait patiently for the clerk to go live in about 2 minutes here.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Recording in progress.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. The hour of 10 o'clock having arrived, we will call this meeting of our Santa Clara County Health and Hospital Committee to order. I am County Supervisor Joe Simidian, and I am joined by County Supervisor Otto Lee, but we will ask the clerk to call the roll just as a matter of form and process. So let me turn to the clerk to do just that.
Vice Chairperson Lee,
Present?
Chairperson Simidian.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. We now have established quorum, and that takes us to public comment. Public comment is that portion of our agenda set aside for comment by members of the public on non-agendized items. Again, those are items not on our agenda today, but that are properly within the purview of this committee. We allow up to 3 minutes if we have a relatively modest number of speakers, and somewhat less time if we have a greater number of speakers pursuant to the board practices which are identified on page 2 of our published agenda. Let me turn to the clerk and ask how many speakers, if any, we have under public comment today.
There are currently 2.
All right, well, let's go ahead and hear from those 2 folks. And again, we'll allow up to 3 minutes, and this is for a public comment on non-agendized items properly within the purview of our committee. Go right ahead through the clerk.
Thank you. Our first speaker is Scott Largent. I've unmuted you. Please accept the unmute. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Good morning, everyone. Scott Largent. What I'd like to talk about today at public comment, and I have brought this up at a lot of different meetings recently, is the problem that we're having down in the Faa Crash Zone, in the flight path that's down at Heading and Coleman, which is pretty much our version here in Santa Clara County of a FEMA camp, which it does not look like that at all. I understand that these areas like this need to be cleaned out by not enforcing the law out here, because our previous police chief of San Jose said it was a no-go. It has made it very difficult out here. It's like a big mop bucket. You just kind of throw everybody in there. Regular homeless people, people that are disabled, people that are sober, domestic violence survivors, people that should be institutionalized, and just some other people that should have been helped to get on their way. And I don't think it would have required very much help. Yesterday, the city came out here and started posting notices. A lot of this stuff talks about the right of way and putting stuff into motorhomes and getting your stuff into a 12 by 12 section. They attempted to do this right when COVID first hit. Now, these are city workers that are coming out here, but there should be people from the county. There should be people from behavioral health. There should be social workers. There should be people with actual solutions. There should be a couple of mechanics. There should be some moving trucks, tow straps, boxes, options to put things into storage, and, solutions to get people on their way is what I keep talking about. There's a gentleman out here named Sean, artist guy. I've talked about him a lot. No criminal record. And the system is literally just sending this guy. You guys are literally going to make this guy break. Nobody has been out there. And I keep talking about this. This man needs some serious help. And it's activists, retired social workers, other people from the community now that are stepping to the plate out here. You guys are healing administrators, and you guys are also shot callers in our county. Otto, Joe, you guys can make calls right now to make this stuff happen. If these people are getting saturated with these notices right now, let's bring in the help. Where's the therapy? Where's somebody to hold their hand right now? Where's somebody to help organize things out here? These notices and starting to create a system of, from section to section with cages and, gates, and, you flop them from here, you flop them to there, you throw them in the creek. And it just seems so inhumane. It's like we're just washing them all down the Guadalupe into Alviso. Something is majorly wrong. I would ask that both of you come on a field trip and come out here. You guys need to see what's really going on before a federal judge is going to be.
Our next speaker is Richard Scott. I've unmuted you. Please go ahead.
Hi. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Again, my name is Richard Scott. I am the former and retired supervisor of the original county mental health homeless team. I know that both the county and the city have been strapped in terms of providing services for the unhoused in our community. And I know that our city staff in particular takes a beating around this when our problem is more in the hands of the city council that don't have the political courage to do what is needed. I'd like to encourage, I know that the other day on a meeting, many of the mental health workers expressed just overwork and frustration and burnout with regard to trying to deal with problems that they don't have the resources to deal with. I would really like to see some creative solutions like using retired social workers and therapists who would be willing to help in supporting the mental health needs of this community, as well as doing outreach. In addition, I would appreciate your committee supporting the use of the Spring Street site as the sanctioned encampment. They use the excuse all the time that the FAA won't let them. The only reason that site was set aside was for noise abatement. And the problems with people living under the flight path. Well, homeless people live under the freeways all the time. The noise in the Spring Street area is a lot less than they're subjected to by the fact that they're driven to these other places. So I would really appreciate your help in this effort. I know that you would like to do something about it. We are just not using the solutions that are available and have been available in other counties. Thank you very much.
That concludes our request to speak.
Thank you, and thank you to our public speakers. That takes us to item number 3, which is to approve the consent calendar and changes to the committee agenda. We have a very focused agenda today. I do not anticipate the need for any changes to the published agenda. And of course, the only item on our consent calendar today is actually the adjournment. We will simply ask Supervisor Lee for a motion to approve the consent calendar and the committee agenda as published.
Yes, so moved.
All right, motion by Supervisor Lee, second by Semidian. Madam Clerk, call the roll just as a matter of form, please.
Vice Chairperson Lee. Chairperson Semidian.
Hi, thank you very much. All right, that takes us to the heart of our discussion today, which is items 4, 5, and 6. And we are looking today at a conversation in this special hearing about what might be described as lethal, less lethal, and in the parlance of some, military style equipment that is obtained and or used by various folks here in the county. And just to tee this up for folks in terms of how anticipating we will go through the conversation today, we have, as I mentioned a moment ago, 3 items, items 4, 5, and 6. And really what they come down to is first a report from the administration and the county counsel's office, then second an opportunity to hear from and have a conversation with our Office of Correction and Law Enforcement Monitoring, sometimes referred to as OCLEM. And then third, the opportunity to hear directly from the Office of the Sheriff with respect to the various kinds of armaments that I described a moment ago. I think I'd like to ask all of our participants today to try and focus on what do we have and what kind of policies do we have in place that determine what we have and how it's used. And I'm going to sort of try and bring us back to that conversation and focus throughout each of the sort of 3 parts of the conversation today. I want to say at the outset that I think no one should doubt that the county and the Board of Supervisors and the members of this committee understand the need for safety and effectiveness in terms of what we acquire and how we use it, or how various independent officials use what they acquire as well. So please know as we go forward in the conversation that the safety of both our own personnel and the public, of course, as well as the effectiveness of the organization to getting the job done are understood, they're givens, but that does not obviate the importance of our addressing these other issues. On each item, I'll ask for a report, and after the report, I will then turn to my colleague, Supervisor Otto Lee, ask him for his comments and questions, and I will offer my own. Before we have comments and questions from the two members of this committee, however, I will ask if there are public commenters on these various items, and unless we have a considerable number, we'll try and allocate 2 minutes for folks to speak. All right, I think that lays it out for the day. At least I hope so. Let me turn to the administration and the Office of the County Council and see who's here and what they have to present.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Supervisor Committee. Good morning, Supervisor Lee. Gene Clark, Chief Procurement Officer. I'm going to speak to you this morning on the action items we had for inventory. I like how you said that, Supervisor Committee. What do we have? And in your report, you will see an inventory list of information that we put together from the respective departments. Inventory is shown by department, by sheriff, by probation, and by district attorney. So I think, can you see that on my screen now?
Yes, although if you have the ability to enlarge, that would be helpful.
Okay, let me try to just, does that help you, sir?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. So this is attachment A that was in the packet. And again, worked with the departments. This is the first one here. Let me just go to the top here, just where it starts. This is for the sheriff. And you'll see here the vehicle ID number and the description of the vehicles. So just scrolling through here gives you what that inventory says. There's obviously different kinds of equipment that the department needs. And then I'm just scrolling down here because then at one point we go to another department. So this is sheriff here that we're looking at, these pages here, just as a kind of a cursory look, if you will. And then this is the probation department here, their inventory. So just again, just a cursory look here, keeping it fairly high level, of course, open to any questions that you may have. And I know the department is on the call here as well for any particular questions about this equipment. So, and then we go to the Office of the District Attorney and the equipment that they have. So this was a request by the board, by the committee, pardon me. So that is our first attachment that I wanted to share. I guess if there's any questions, I'm happy to try to answer, or the department. And if you'd like, I can go on to another slide here that we have. So let me stop there and just kind of see if you have any questions here on the vehicle equipment.
I think what I'd like to suggest, if Supervisor Lee is amenable, is that we let you complete your report. In fact, take the entire report from administration and county council, ask you then to hang in there with us, and then come back and take questions on a sort of a more comprehensive basis rather than bit by bit. That will require us to keep our notes together and our questions organized, but I think we can manage. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, moving forward here, can you see this inventory here that I have for lethal and less lethal armament?
Yes, but again, you can pump up the size just a little bigger. There you go.
All right, right on. You betcha. Okay, scrolling through here. This is, again, inventory we prepared in working with the particular departments on lethal and less lethal. Just going to, again, do a cursory here. We worked with the departments on this information. They've had an opportunity to review it. So this is sheriff here. And this is current less lethal for DA probation department. Current state that they've got showing here as their inventory. This is less lethal for the sheriff department as we categorized it. Again, just high level. And then one other request from the committee was to look at the 1033 program and what inventory had been purchased. And you'll see that inventory here. You will note that it is somewhat dated since we've purchased anything under 1033, which is a surplus program. That the last procurement was back in 2014. Prior to that, one procurement in 13 and the one before that in 2011. So there's been no current procurement under the 1033 programs over the last several years. So want to bring that up to attention here. And then the last thing I will share here is some recommendations that we have here for from procurement that we feel would help shore up the workflow, if you will. So I'm going to share that. And again, I'll make that a little bigger. So based on our analysis, we recommend for your consideration just a few things here. We're recommending that in the workflow itself, I'm looking at bullet number 1, there are some controls in place, supervisors, for acquisition from all of the departments. What we suggest for your consideration is we include another workflow, and I don't want to get too deep here, in SAP that would allow the department heads, the executives, to delegate a more senior person to approve these types of armaments. Right now, there are controls in there through workflow in SAP. We're suggesting, though, that there be a more senior eyes on it, if you will, that they would actually go in, they would get an email into SAP, and they would approve the acquisition. That's one recommendation. Number 2, we can do a little bit better job consolidating some of our equipment. I do know the departments work with each other. At times, they do share information on what they procure. But number 2 gets at getting a more standardized, kind of efficiency in the procurements themselves through lead times, through costs. So we can collectively in our procurement strategy kind of get on the same page of what our requirements are, and as a result of that have standardization, if you will, and better costs. That kind of avenue would be something that we would recommend and procurement has the ability to facilitate that. We're probably in the best position to say, hey, for you 3 departments here, this is what some of your demand is, and this is the procurement methods that we would recommend. Right now, respectfully, they're a little more, doing their own thing. Again, they do share some procurements, but we think there's an opportunity from our lens to get that more transparent for the departments, consolidate, leverage, and procure overall. And then the third for your consideration would be department inventory and procurement reconciliation, where we do some, in large part, what we're doing here, that we go back on a periodic basis and we check in with you on what has been procured, for adequacy, for just your overall review. Again, mirroring a lot of what we put together here initially, we simply suggest for your consideration that we would continue this effort here on a more regular basis. So that gentleman is my report here from administration. Supervisor submitting, if you'd like James to now continue, James Williams, he'll be presenting next. Happy to hand that off for him to continue or answer any questions you may have for me right now. And I'll stop sharing here.
I think I'd like to ask if we could have Mr. Williams and his shop share whatever they would like to share at this time, and then we'll take public comment, if any, and then we'll go to questions and comments from Supervisor Lee and myself. And again, we'll ask you and your colleagues, if any, to hang in with us throughout this entire discussion. Mr. Clark, okay?
Absolutely, sir.
All right, Mr. Williams, we turn to County Council. Good morning.
Good morning, Supervisor Submitting, Supervisor Lee. Our write-up is found in attachment D as in David to item number 4. We've described the current status of AB 481, which is a bill that would mandate governing board approval for the acquisition of military style equipment. Just to give you current status on the legislation, that bill did clear the Assembly, is now in the Senate. It's set for its hearing in front of the Senate Public Safety Committee next Tuesday, June 29th. So the bill is moving forward. One important change from the bill that's reflected in our write-up, but is important for the committee to know, is that the detailed list of definition of military equipment from the bill was actually deleted in amendments. And instead, the bill now just applies to, quote, military equipment, which is defined as, quote, weapons, arms, military supplies, and equipment that readily may be used for military purposes, including but not limited to radar systems or military-grade transport vehicles. And you can find that language in footnote 2 of attachment D. So the broader definition, which was largely reflected in the more detailed categories that you'll find on packet page 43, has been actually stripped out of the legislation. If that bill passes, and it again appears to be moving forward, that will be the controlling legislation that will define governing board approval. If that bill does not pass, the board could proceed with a policy that provides for governing board approval for acquisition and use policy related to military style equipment. We would recommend something probably along the lines of the surveillance technology ordinance, maybe slightly simplified in approach. Then the key issue is the definition that of what is military style equipment that would apply. And I think the important consideration there is, to have it appropriately apply to the kinds of equipment that that there would be broader concern for a law enforcement agency to have, but not create a cumbersome process for the kind of equipment that would be more standard. And there's some, I think, obvious examples on one side or the other, and then there's, I think, some harder questions in the middle. So you see some of that content reflected in attachment D. We're available to answer questions that you may have. Our recommendation is, however, before moving forward with anything more formally, to see what happens in the next just handful of months with AB 481, because if it does pass, that will govern and be superseding, and we would want to know that, I think, in advance of doing a lot of activity to create our own local rule that that might not be as relevant. So I'll pause.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. And to your point about policy forthcoming and some of the timelines involved, I don't know what Supervisor Lee's thinking on these matters may be, but my own inclination is not to move forward today with any specific proposals, even things that are relatively non-controversial. In part because I want to take some time after we hear from folks today to assess what makes sense, but also because, as you made passing reference to, we've got a legislative timeline that affects the context in which we do our work. I'm thinking of the fact that if I read your memo correctly, this year's legislative calendar means we won't know for sure until October 10th what the governor has and has not signed. So with all of that in mind, I think we are best advised to just hang on a bit with respect to any policy proposals and or adoptions. Let me ask that we have folks from OCLEM and the Sheriff's Department teed up to respond to comments and questions in a minute, even though we are under the administration and county council report section of the agenda, because I suspect that some of the questions that are asked may require the expertise from either our OCLEM folks or the Sheriff's Department. So again, if you can make yourselves available, appreciate that. But first, let me turn to the clerk and see if we have any speakers on this topic.
There is one request.
Great, let's welcome that speaker. And since we have just the one request, we can go with 2 minutes, please.
Thank you. Our first speaker is Scott Largent. I have unmuted you. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Scott Largent. Very interesting information to read through. I have to get more familiar with the Senate bills that you were discussing. But what I'm kind of getting at in public comment right here, if a lot of this equipment, if there's issues, of course, we know there's an oversight process. A lot of the different agencies will have an internal affairs system. You know, you're able to access anything from chest cameras to call for service. You know, a lot of that important stuff that either could lead to a conviction or, you know, somebody being found innocent. You know, it's like kind of an either way thing. What I'm getting at right now is our district attorney's office has no such oversight. There's no internal affairs system for their officers. There's no chest cameras. And when you want to file a complaint, and I'll get to that in a second here, it goes to another investigator. And if you go on their website, you can look this information over. It goes to kind of a burned out investigator named Moses. And it should have an internal affairs system to hold these people accountable. And it's just not there. And Joe, you've talked so much all these years about surveillance ordinances and oversight and being transparent. They're just not. The complaint that I wanted to file, my cell phone was turned in to the Sheriff's Department by a previous kind of partner in crime turned bad, Susan Bassey. And when that phone was turned into the Sheriff's Department, it's being held as evidence. Jeff Rosen is trying to access that cell phone without a warrant. You know, and there are rules in our system to be able to do things like that. And the other investigations that he's running against activists is just shocking. So you want to file a complaint against his investigators, why they're doing all this bizarre stuff, but it just gets buried. It just goes right back to them. I'm a little confused, and I think you guys need to look into that. I'm not sure probation and parole does the same thing.
That concludes our requests.
Thank you very much. And let me turn now to Supervisor Lee for comments or questions on this first portion of the agenda.
Thank you, Chair Samedian. Can you hear me okay?
We can, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So first of all, I just want to thank staff and also Sheriff's Office for providing the very comprehensive vehicle and inventory list here, and also the good report and update on the AB 481 from the County Council's office. And also want to thank the procurement to have the review of the purchasing and some suggestions that's been provided today. First of all, I do have a couple of questions. One is it possible for staff to provide some clarity and information on the settlements and some type of legal judgment involving the lethal and the less lethal armaments that we've had in the past few years?
Yes, so we have reviewed that information. We did provide a separate memo regarding that. There are no claims, settlements, or judgments paid by the county in the last 10 years regarding any military style equipment.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, James. Now, does the county, through the Sheriff's Office or the Department of Corrections, act as an intermediary for the acquisitions of funding of any military style equipment that is provided to local law enforcement agency within the county?
I'm not aware of the county serving as fiscal agent. San Mateo County serves, I know, as the fiscal agent for NICRIC, which is the Northern California Regional Intelligence Center. I might have messed the name up slightly. The sheriff's office may know something further of the district attorney's office, but I'm not aware that we are a fiscal agent for any regional acquisition of equipment. But I can't say that with comprehensive status. I just can't think of any when I'm scouring through my mind on that.
Thank you, James. I wonder if the sheriff might have comments on this, if she might know off the top of her head.
Thank you, Supervisor Lee. We do not act as a fiscal agent. Now, I think that this question could be answered probably better by Mr. Williams or Dr. Smith, because the Office of Emergency Management does process a lot of the grant information for the SHISH gap and for the purchasing. So they would have a better answer on that. The Sheriff's Office does not.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And then one other question I have is about the mutual aid agreements, and whether or not if there are any mutual aid agreements or those memorandum of understandings, MOUs, type agreements between your office, the sheriff's office, and any of the local law enforcement agencies in the county that might result in these military style equipment being passed through to these other agencies.
In terms of equipment, no, but the state has a very highly regulated mutual aid system where the sheriff in each county acts as the operational area commander and coordinates all mutual aid requests. So any agency that needs any kinds of assistance with any civil unrest will come to the sheriff's office, and we find the resources. If the county exhausts what we have in our operational area, we go to the regional area. And if the region exhausts, we can go out statewide for resources. But that is something that is practiced, efficient, well-recognized, and it's something that we do statewide. It works very effectively. And fire has the same type of system. So we have a very important role in mutual aid requests statewide.
Okay, thank you. And at this point, that's all the question I have. Thank you, Chair Smitty.
Thank you, Supervisor Lee, and thank you to the Sheriff's Department for your availability to help us answer some of these questions as well. Mr. Clark, I want to start with the vehicle inventory in the Sheriff's Office and just ask a few questions to improve my understanding of what we have here. Because we've moved this topic from our full board then to a previously scheduled meeting, which had to be rescheduled by virtue of the tragedy at the VTA yards, and now to this meeting, some page numbers may have changed over that period of time. And so if there's a momentary confusion about which page number we're on or what document we're looking, I'll ask everybody to be a little patient with that. But Mr. Clark, as I look at the description of vehicles, there's page 4 of 19 in your attachment A.
Okay.
And down toward the bottom is vehicle 16453. Again, that's vehicle 16453. And it's a 2016 Ford, I gather that's all-wheel drive police interceptor, has LPR, which I want to verify is a license plate reader, yes?
Thank you, Supervisor. I'm going to have to ask the department to clarify that just to make sure.
Thank you. And I expect
Sure.
that will be the case quite a bit here, so not to worry.
Thank you.
Let me ask the Sheriff's Department if they can help. Again, I'm looking at attachment A, and this is the vehicle number 16453, and it indicates that it has LPR. I just want to confirm that that's a license plate reader.
Correct. LPR is a license plate reader, correct.
And I don't see that designation on a lot of other vehicles, if any, and I'm just curious how many of our vehicles has an LPR, a license plate reader on it. We're talking about one, we're talking about half dozen, we're talking about more.
I'm getting fingers up from across the room who say one.
Okay.
But I'm not certain of that. It's something we can research.
Sure. I want to get a rough idea. And is there someone in the team there today who could share a little bit about why we have this one particular vehicle of all that is equipped in this way and how it is used? And Sheriff, I know I have this longstanding interest in surveillance technology and how it's used. So I'm taking advantage of this opportunity just to gain a little deeper understanding about what we have and how it's used. And that's the basis for the question.
What I have.
Sheriff, if you're speaking.
Yes, hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you, Sheriff.
Okay. What I'm told as we sit here, and we can do a further review, but this is something that is assigned to and paid for by the contract cities, is my initial understanding. We'll look into it further, and if that changes, we will let your office know.
All right. If we could get an off-agenda memo on that, Sheriff, so that it's available to not only myself, but Supervisor Lee and our three colleagues, is that something we could ask for?
Yes.
Thank you. And as long as we're having the conversation, I know this has been a recent discussion in Los Altos Hills with their council, city council, town council there. But I also note that this is a 2016 vehicle that already apparently has the technology. So presumably this conversation has taken place in other communities. So I appreciate the willingness and ability to sort of bring us up to speed on how all of that is working. Thank you. And then, forgive me, maybe a quick Google search would have told me, but I didn't get a chance. On page 7 of 19, vehicle ID number 11601R. So this is about 2/3 of the way down the page 7 of 19. There's something called a 2011 Bolton 22 foot. I'm curious what that is and how it is used.
Thank you. Yes, that is a boat, and it's used for the dive team.
Thank you. And on page 10 of 19, 2 questions. If I go about, again, 2/3 of the way down the page, vehicle ID 16040, hashtag capital REF exclamation point. And I do not know what that is, and I'm curious to know.
It looks like an error in Excel. I also don't know what it is. I don't know if this list came from procurement or from our office, but we will look into that and include that in our off-agenda report.
Thank you, appreciate that. Up above, not quite halfway down the page, vehicle ID 19556. This is a 2019 Chevrolet Express caged van. And I see there are, I think, 2 of them listed. There's a second one right after that. Could you share with us what that is and how it is used, please?
That is for the transportation of inmates who are going to court, going to hospital, going to out of county. We have several vans and buses used for transportation.
Thank you. Going then, I think that takes me through the end of the vehicle description list. And I think the couple of questions then about anything that might not be on the list. It occurs to me that vehicle is a word that we usually, but not always, associate with vehicles on land. You've been kind enough, or procurement has, to list as well boats, obviously, and even a mower, I believe, if I remember the list correctly. What's not on the list that moves people or goods either on land, on water, or in the air? Anything else here? And I'm sorry, Sheriff Smith, if your department is speaking, you're on mute. Thank you.
Yes, I'm getting input from other people. To my knowledge, there is nothing that is not on this report. We will further verify that. I was unprepared for this question, but I believe it's very comprehensive. It includes boats, motorcycles, vehicles, tractors, and everything. I believe it's all inclusive. What we don't see on here is the air. We don't see the helicopter on here at first glance, but we will, there's been absolutely no attempt to omit anything from this list. We try to be very comprehensive and work with procurement on it.
Great,
So
thank
that's
you.
the only thing that appears.
And thank you. And there is the reference that you just made to the helicopter, of which we have one. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you. Would appreciate the follow-up on that. And let me turn to procurement. Mr. Clark, forgive me, I can't find you on my screen, but I think you're still there somewhere.
I am, sir.
Thank you. Your understanding as well is that the possible exception of the helicopter, we have everything here.
That is correct, sir.
And Mr. Clark, forgive me if we've discussed this previously, but as I said, this item has regrettably but necessarily been continued. Do we have an asset management system in place that allows us to say with some confidence, here's what we've got in the way of vehicles, whether it's in the sheriff's department or the district attorney's department, or probation?
Yes, good question. We do have assets are tracked through the finance department for anything greater than $5,000 would be categorized as a fixed asset. So yes, there are reports. There's a kind of a backup information, if you will, that would cross over to help this. Correct.
Thank you. And Mr. Clark, and I'll jump back and forth between you and the sheriff, if I may, sheriff's department, if I may.
Sure.
On the issue of vehicles, do I correctly gather from reviewing the information and the information that the sheriff's department has provided in real time today that we do not have in our departments, sheriff's department or probation or district attorney, we do not have anything that might be characterized as a military equipment in terms of vehicles?
You know, I would say for that, I'm acknowledging I'm not an expert in that military definition, to be very honest. I know that had some discussion on it. I think the best way I can categorize what we researched was every piece of equipment that was transparent and was disclosed. Whether it's actually defined as military style, I don't have that expertise to be able to respectfully call that out, Supervisor. So I would need some help.
All right, let me turn to the sheriff's department. Actually, before I do that, Mr. Clark, I'm flipping through my pages here, but I don't have the note. Could you remind me of the name of the federal program under which surplus equipment is sometimes made available?
Sure, 1033.
Do we have any vehicles that have come to us pursuant to 1033? Let me try my question to you, sir, that way.
Do we have, the only vehicles that we've had through 1033 are the three that were identified, and those were several years ago. There's nothing new since those acquisitions of three equipment back in 2014. It has not been used.
And the equipment there is what again, sir? The three.
Sure. Let me look at that real quick here. I have it here. It's a camouflage set. It is a sight reflex, which I think deals with scopes. Again, I need help. And it's a utility truck.
Okay, so the one vehicle we have received is the utility truck, and any notion of what that is, what its capabilities are, or is that a better question for the Sheriff's Department?
That's a better question for the sheriff. We may have to research that. It's 2011. I don't know myself, sir.
Thank you. If the Sheriff's Department can help with a response to that, I'm trying to identify whether or not we have anything that either is a 1033 acquisition or a what might be colloquially described as a military vehicle in the fleet.
Supervisor, I'm not sure if you asked me the question, but I can provide a response if you like.
Thank you.
On page 7 of 19 on the vehicles, about a little more than halfway down the page, starting with 89TO94R is a Humvee. It was acquired from the 1033 program. It is non-street legal. It is only at the range for hauling equipment. We do have that in our fleet. That is one of the three items that is from the 1033 program, probably could be described as military, but it provides a valuable tool for us. And the 1033 program, just as a reminder, is free. The other items, the scopes that are on the 1033 list have been in the process of being returned for quite some time because we no longer use those. They were returned last month on May 9th. And the camouflage, that was netting that we used for shade, and that's all been destroyed and no longer exists. So the only thing that we have from the 1033 program is the utility truck, and that was acquired in 2011, and that's in your report.
Thank you. And is that, and forgive me, I was flipping pages quickly as you were giving reference numbers. Is that the vehicle ID 89TO94R? Did I get that correctly?
You did get it correct, yes.
All right. Is it possible we could get a plain old fashioned photograph of that vehicle as part of your follow-up, Sheriff?
Yes.
Thank you. I would ask for that and appreciate the willingness to provide it. And if there's any brief description of how the vehicle is used, that would be appreciated as well. Anything either for Mr. Clark or for the Sheriff and the Sheriff's Department, anything else that would colloquially seem to fit the description of a military vehicle in your judgment?
Sure, this is Gene. I would say that I believe all of the equipment is listed. Whether something in here is considered military, I would still need some help with that. But I am confident that this is fully transparent and comprehensive. We did work with all the departments a good amount of time on this. But I don't, yeah, you bet. I don't have the expertise of whether one of these could be military.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the Sheriff's Department, see if they have a comment, but then I'm going to turn to Supervisor Lee, whose experience in our military may help put a little bit of clarity around the phrase military vehicle. I'm thinking of an armored personnel carrier, for example, as the kind of thing I'm asking about. But let me turn back to the Sheriff's Department and see if they have any thoughts that would help clarify this.
First of all, the definition of military style or military grade equipment is a moving target. We have many armored tools, including ballistic vests, helmets, ballistic shields. We also have vehicles that have ballistic panels in them. Until I can get a description of military grade or style equipment, it's something that we can't answer, but we do, including in all of our cars, we have ballistic panels in the doors. So I've even heard military style or military grade equipment described as even our batons. So certainly, depending on the definition, there may be things on that list, but as procurement stated, it's very comprehensive and detailed. And I believe that what we have is necessary for us to do our law enforcement job.
All right. Supervisor Lee, any other questions here? I do want to go to the inventory of armaments in a minute, but while we're wrapping up the vehicles, any further comments or questions?
Thank you, Supervisor Smidian. So Sheriff, the response earlier you have is there was a 1033 item that has been recently returned, and you said that was like one Humvee. Is that correct?
No, sir. What was returned was the scopes on it. The Humvee we still have, and the other item, the nets, are no longer serviceable and destroyed and gone.
Okay, so we still currently have that. How many Humvees do we have right now?
Sir, we just have one and it's at the range.
Okay. All right, and that's the one you said you only use it for hauling equipment, right?
Yes, at the range. It's not street legal, and we will provide supervisor at Supervisor Smidian's request a photograph of the Humvee.
Great, thank you. I might be the only person on the board that has been trained and have the ability to drive a Humvee before I was deployed to Iraq. I just add that as a side comment. And they ride horribly, very rough, but they can go up 45 degrees, which is useful for hauling equipment clearly. So thank you for that. But in terms of any type of tactical equipment or armored personnel carrier, we don't have any of that in our inventory, correct?
We do have it there. Armored personnel carrier, we do have an armored vehicle that is on the list called a Bearcat. And that's used in tactical situations when we have to make an entry. When we had the BTA incident, that vehicle is actually stationed in South County, and we didn't use it during the BTA because we knew that a fast response is what we needed. So what we used, and you've seen in the videos, what we used is patrol cars with ballistic shields because we knew that there was an armed subject and believed that he was on the 3rd floor. And so that was really a tactical disadvantage that we had, and the deputies made do with what they had at that point. And you remember the San Jose officer that was murdered by someone on a balcony. He was ambushed and shot in the head. So having a suspect on the 3rd floor, had we had Bearcat here, it would have been tremendously valuable as cover for our responding deputies.
And is the Bearcat also being used like a communication center, like when that incident happens?
No, we do have TCP. No, it's not used as that. We do have a tactical command post that is used for that, but that one is not armored. We also have a vehicle that is an older Suburban, I believe it's on the list, that also has ballistic windows and panels.
Mm-hmm. When you say tactical command post, is that a vehicle?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. And is that's an inventory also, correct? Or
Yes, it's on page 8 near the bottom, about 4th from the bottom.
thank you.
11920R.
11920R.
11902R, yes. Near the bottom of page 8 of 19, the prime mover, that is the tactical command post.
Ah, okay, yes, the Ford Prime Mover truck reimbursable.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so that's the PPP you're talking about. Okay. And as far as the Bearcat's concerned, at this point, you said we only have one, and that station only at South County at this point.
Correct, we have one Bearcat. It was purchased from Federal Homeland Security grant money. It is shared by agencies in the South County area, and it's currently housed in South County.
Great, thank you.
All right.
Thank you, that's all the questions I have, yeah.
Thank you, Supervisor Lee. I want to move on, Mr. Clark, and the Sheriff's Department to the list of armaments that Mr. Clark had up on the screen for us. And Mr. Clark, if you want to put those up again, that would perhaps be helpful as we scroll through slowly but steadily with questions.
Happy to.
All right, if we can go to, let's see, if we can scroll down to the next page, please.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yep.
And I'm going to thank you for the tech support here. I'm going to ask you to go just a little bit farther on the screen. Thank you. And I wanted to ask, keep going just a little bit more, sir. Thank you. If we stop there sort of a little bit farther than halfway down the screen, there's reference to the shotguns as they are described as a type. And then under caliber, there is reference to the 12 gauge, and the one is described as buckshot with filter control, and the other is Hydra shock. Could someone share some information about what those two armaments are, how they're used, what the reference to filter control and Hydra shock suggests or indicates?
Yes, we have present today Sergeant Somerville, who is the range master and familiar with all these types of firearms. Sergeant?
So the 12 gauge double-wide buckshot, it's actually flight control. There's a proprietary design, a wad inside the cartridge case that gives us a tighter concentration of the 9 double-wide buckshot pellets. For liability reasons, it's a smaller spread pattern. It's one of the duty rounds that we have for the Sheriff's Office, both custody and enforcement. And then the 12 gauge 1 ounce rifle slug, lead slug, Hydra shock, it's actually a low recoil slug that travels at about 1,300 feet per second.
Okay, thank you for that. Let me ask that we flip through pages to the less lethal items. And I did want to stop here. Thank you, Mr. Clark. Sure. And see, I think Mr. Janako is with us from our Office of Correctional Law Enforcement Monitoring. Yes, Mr. Janako. Maybe not. Well, let me ask Mr. Clark and or the Sheriff's Department, and perhaps Mr. Williams then. I noticed the batons are indicated here, including the different types. My understanding is that while these are standard issue in law enforcement, I see Mr. Janako's on the screen now, thank you. My understanding is that while these are maybe standard issue in law enforcement, that they're actually unlawful for civilian members of the public to possess. Do I have that correct, Mr. Clark? Do you know? Mr. Janako, do you know?
I believe the ability for private individuals to have them may vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but I believe that in some jurisdictions it would be not permissible for a civilian to possess some of these armaments, yes.
All right. Let me ask the Sheriff's Department, does your office have in place policies that are written as to the circumstances under which it's appropriate to use the baton and how to use the baton?
Yes, we have policies, we do training, we do have different types of batons. And to correct Mr. Janako, it's not jurisdiction by jurisdiction. Statewide, they cannot be possessed by non-peace officers. But yes, we have them, we have training, we have, you've seen our use of force policies, our policies are online, and we train continually with the use.
Right. Mr. Janako, forgive me if I can't recall, is this an area we've asked you to look at more specifically?
With regard to batons, no. And the sheriff is correct. In the state of California, it is unlawful for individuals to possess batons of this nature. But what I was talking about is jurisdiction by jurisdiction, meaning the country. There are places where it is.
Got it. And then we have in that same display reference to OC spray, which raises questions about CS and OC and tear gas and pepper spray. Sheriff, I think probably someone in your department is the proper person to say, could someone tell us a little bit about the difference or distinction between CS and OC as it's listed in the charts, and what is used when and where and under what circumstances?
Yes, we have Sergeant Stream here, who is on our mobile field force, our crowd control team, and he can discuss the different types of gas and their application. But generally their application is determined, like the OC that our deputies carry, are really determined by the deputy themselves, other than larger forms of gas. And I think Sergeant Stream can add on to that.
Sure, good morning. OC spray is a canister that all patrol deputies are going to carry, and is used as a less lethal tool designed to use a less amount of force in a situation and bring an incident under control without having to use physical force. It's very effective in that regard. CS gas is only going to be carried by special teams, both by crowd control or the CERT team, and it's generally used more for widespread disbursement. If you have a riot type situation, or if the crowd control team is having rocks and bottles thrown at them, things that can potentially cause serious bodily injury, then CS gas can be used in that situation to disperse the crowd and bring control back to the situation.
Thank you. And Mr. Janako and Sheriff Smith, my recollection is we've had some back and forth in some of the conversations previously, either in committee or at the full board, around the use of both tear gas, pepper spray, similar products, and rubber bullets and or other projectiles in crowd control. And we were trying to see if we could, or at least some of us were trying to see if we could make some progress on policies in place there. And Mr. Janako, my recollection is initially there was some resistance to that from the Sheriff's Department, but that subsequently there was a little bit of progress there from my perspective. Am I remembering this back and forth correctly? It's been a while.
The issue about whether or not and how to deploy both tear gas and the use of less lethal in a crowd control situation is the basis for the report that is on today's meeting. I haven't had any discussions with the Sheriff's Department, but what I can say is that they haven't rejected the 2 recommendations that are made in that report,
All
as far
right.
as I know.
Well, we'll let you make that presentation when we get to your portion of the agenda then. Sheriff Smith will certainly want to hear from you at that time as well, if that works for you.
Yes, I have included that in my remarks.
Great, thank you. Then if we can go further in the description. Well, actually, forgive me. Let me let me ask that we go to the next page.
Okay.
And a little bit farther. Thank you.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
There we go. Let's stop there for a moment. So looking toward the middle of the screen here, the Penn Arms GSL 1 40mm less lethal launcher. And Mr. Clark, I am not calling on you, sir, only because I gather that these are questions better addressed to the Sheriff's Department, but feel free to chime in if at some point you can be helpful. Could I ask somebody, what is this and what's it used for?
Thank you, John. Yes, from the Sheriff's Office, again, Sergeant Somerville.
So the Penn Arms GS1 is a single shot 40mm launcher that is only available to both our SWAT team, CERT, and crowd control for the use of deploying impact projectiles and deploying and using CS and OC gas munitions.
Is it capable of launching something else?
The manufacturers do make the munitions, different type of munitions like aerial flashbangs, but currently we only have 3 different types of munitions that we currently use here at the Sheriff's Office.
And would you tell us again what those 3 are, please, Sergeant? Thank you. That's a helpful clarification.
We have the direct impact 40mm foam projectile, and we have the 2 gas munitions, CS and OC.
Tell us a little bit about the foam projectile, if you would, please, and what it's used for and how it works.
It's a munition used for the purpose of de-escalating a potentially violent situation from a safe distance. It is a extended range impact delivery system. It'd be no different than using a baton from a safe distance, but it's the munition itself is has a foam nose used for direct impact on the extremities of the subject. We cannot shoot anywhere that could cause any serious bodily injury, such as the chest, face, neck, and spine. That weapon system, that munition travels at about 325 feet per second.
And the foam projectile you've mentioned is foam on the nose, but is the remainder of the projectile a hard plastic?
The remainder, so yes, the foam nose is the portion that impacts the target area, and there is a plastic projectile behind that, and then the metal casing stays inside the system itself.
And you mentioned that it's designed to be used on specific parts of the body, but presumably that depends on the ability of the user to be accurate in the moment, yes?
It depends on what portion of the body is available to be targeted, yes. We qualify that weapon system annually.
Okay. All right. And I think that covers my specific questions for the moment about the items on the screen. So thank you for that, Mr. Clark. Now the question, I think, does go to you and to our county council and perhaps even to the county executive, which is in understanding that this is an inventory of what's on hand. The next question, of course, is, well, if there was a desire on the part of any of these departments, sheriff's, probation, DA, to to acquire some other kind of armament, is there at present any review or screening as to the appropriateness or desirability, or if the funds have been allocated to the department, are they simply able to place the order?
Sure, Supervisor Smitty, and thank you. I can answer that in a different couple of ways here, I think. When the request occurs, it does go into Ariba, which is a portion of the SAP software itself. That workflow, at that point, the funds are what we call pre-encumbered, they're captured. And then eventually, depending on the procurement method, they are expended, if you will, once the equipment is in, once it's received. So the funding step occurs when the requisition starts. Through that workflow, then that is where you have individuals reviewing it. And they literally get an email. And in that email, they can say, I approve with, I just approve, I approve with comments, I decline with comments. So that's how that workflow works with the funding combined. So it's this kind of partnership, if you will, between having the budget available in there. It checks for that, make sure the money's there, and it's reviewed, and it goes through that cycle eventually to where you receive the material, it's received into the system, it then goes over to accounts payable, where a warrant is issued for the check to the vendor. And that's a little bit of the procurement cycle, if you will, that combines finance with the acquisition itself.
All right. And that being said, though, for example, if somebody wanted a projectile, which was other than the three that was described by the sergeant a few moments ago, if I understood correctly, no one's going to second guess whether this is or isn't an appropriate or desirable type of projectile for the launcher.
No, you're correct. The procurement approval process would, for example, in the workflow that's created, the sheriff's department has appropriate staff looking at that to make that approval. Otherwise, could they go out on their own kind of rogue, if you will? No. That wouldn't be honored out there in any kind of a, on behalf of the county, if you will. One good thing, these vendors are pretty savvy. They work with agencies a lot, all over the state, if and sometimes regional and national. So those safeguards, I believe, are there to adequately demonstrate control and review. And again, we're suggesting, and this is more of an administrative action, that we've talked to the department, that we're comfortable that we would simply put another workflow in for a higher level official to also approve. But I guess in summary, to say it, it's a pretty solid process, Supervisor, with respect to budget control, physical control, and the actual review of the acquisition itself. It's pretty solid.
Mr. Clark, I take your point and appreciate your professionalism around the solid nature of the budget controls or the fiscal controls. I'm really getting at a matter that is, I think, beyond the scope of your organization, which is the propriety of the acquisition, which the sheriff's department or the district attorney's office is going to be making their own independent judgment as independently elected officials, but then that intersects with our responsibility as fiscal stewards on the Board of Supervisors to ask ourselves, is this an appropriate use of public funds? I see Dr. Smith has raised his hand, so let me go to him. Dr. Smith?
Yes, I'm sorry. I probably should have jumped in a little earlier, but from the procurement process, the job is to make sure there's a fiscal discipline in purchasing so that the money's there, we buy it appropriately from an appropriate vendor, the contracts are managed. You're really asking from a policy perspective, should we be buying it? And that is typically left to the departments because of their subject matter expertise. Obviously, if they try to buy something that's clearly illegal, that's prevented. But if it's not illegal or immoral, the procurement process doesn't check for that. What I think you're asking about is what James Williams brought up earlier in his report, a manner for the board or quote the county to institute further controls would be similar to what happens with the surveillance ordinance, where the board has adopted a policy in ordinance form that requires any department to comply with the surveillance process and essentially get approval from the board before we buy surveillance equipment, which is more of a policy decision rather than a budgetary decision. The money is there. We know we obviously don't buy them from inappropriate vendors, but the question about whether it should be provided or not, or purchased or not, is made by the board in conjunction with input from the department. So that would, I think, be the model that would accomplish what you're trying to accomplish.
All right, thank you for that, Dr. Smith, and thank you. That was helpful. I think between your remarks and Mr. Clark's remarks, we've blended together the information that I thought would be helpful here. I am prepared, Supervisor Lee, at this point to say thank you and to have you move that we receive the report. And if you're prepared to offer that motion, I would second.
Yes, so move.
And I will second. I just want to confirm with the clerk, we don't have any other speakers on this item.
We've already taken speakers on this item, but I do have one hand raised now.
And is that a new hand?
It is.
Then let's hear from that speaker.
Okay. Our next speaker is Urbish. I have unmuted you. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much to the Board of Supervisors. I wanted to mention about the equipment specifically to the Mossberg. The Mossberg 500 and 590A1. As per the Mossberg Service Center, as of 2016, the model 6-shot 590A1 models are now permanently discontinued. So before purchasing any of the model 590 or 590A1 equipments, it is very important to understand that whether those equipments has been discontinued or whether they are still being managed as a part of a military equipment and be utilized for the as a shotgun within the county requirement, sheriff county requirement, as well as a part of equipment service. Some of the specification and some of the models within the Mossberg, there are only some of the equipments, they are only approved as a military style of equipment, specifically to the model 500. So if any model that is being utilized as a part of the county sheriff's office for the civilian, as a part of the civilian purposes within the county's office, and as well as for the military purposes, it is important to verify and put the compliance that whether those equipments are of a specific purpose or not, and whether they are still be utilized for the purpose of they are purchased for. Also to mention about that, with the capacity of those equipments, it's important to evaluate that which specific model is meant for what set of a capacity that is required to be utilized and be managed. For example, the model, unlike the model 500 and 590 shotguns, which has a ghost ring side, some of the models cannot be easily lifted.
All right.
Our requests.
Thank you very much. We have a motion from Supervisor Lee and a second from me to receive the report. Would you please call the roll, clerk, so that we can document it for the record?
Questions on this one.
I'm sorry, forgive me, Supervisor Lee. I could not hear / understand what you just said. Would you repeat that, please?
Sure. You broke the section into two parts in questioning, so I have not actually asked the questions regarding the less lethal ammunition inventory question.
My apologies. So before we actually take action on the motion, go right ahead, sir.
Yes, thank you. As we have all have probably experienced and seen, there have been activities in the past year on the inappropriate use of these material we talked about, whether it's pepper spray or some of these projectile in various protests. The one a couple came to mind, right? One of which was a protest on some campus, maybe UC Davis, whatnot, where you have protesters kind of chained themselves, not moving anywhere. And then we have some of the law enforcement running around, spraying the pepper spray or rubbing the chemical onto people's body or eyes, whatnot, right?
Apologies, Supervisor Lee, would you please move closer to your microphone? I'm having trouble capturing.
Okay, how about now? Is this any better?
Much better, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so I'm just describing some of the horror scenes we've all seen on TV, right? Of the inappropriate use of, say, pepper spray by spraying at people who are just blocking entrances or chaining themselves, to cause them to move by rubbing these chemical into the body, onto the eyes. So my question is, do we have any policy in this county on the use of these pepper spray, and do we have any prohibition, for example, of rubbing these chemical onto any individual in close range?
Supervisor Lee, Captain Oberdorfer is here and can probably respond to that from a policy perspective.
Thank you.
Good morning, supervisors.
Good morning.
Yes, we've had General Order 12.00, which is our use of force policy, and it has had a limitation on the use of force, particularly of chemical agents. I'll read it verbatim. The use of chemical agents on nonviolent protesters or non-resisting prisoners to assist in separating them or making an arrest is not authorized. And that has been in our policy for a number of years. We've recently made additional modifications to our policy to further clarify that and to bring additional updates from law.
And I'm sure this is also part of the training to every uniform officer, correct?
Absolutely, sir. And the policy that I mentioned, along with all of our policies, are located on our website.
Okay, very good. We talk about batons as well, and the use of batons also applies when it comes to individuals or protesters that are not moving. In other words, they're not. The batons will only be used as more of a defense mechanism, not to be offensive, right?
In a crowd control situation, often they're a defensive tool. But as has been mentioned here previously, less lethal options are also a very viable and important tool in many different situations. Particularly in our day-to-day law enforcement calls for service, less lethal are vital in de-escalating situations without the use of force, particularly without the use of lethal force.
Correct. Yeah. So I certainly believe that use of non-lethal force is always a much better substitute than lethal force when that is safe and this is possible to use.
Excuse me, Supervisor Lee, I apologize for the interruption, but again, difficulty with your microphone, which I think is not unique to my circumstance. Do you want to take just a moment and adjust or connect and reconnect? But I want to make sure we're capturing your comments and questions, Supervisor.
Okay. Is this any better?
Vastly better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think it's my laptop not being open. I apologize about that. So thank you so much for that clarification. So basically, we have a ongoing policy that basically says that chemical agent, including OC or CS and pepper spray, those are not allowed to be used on peaceful protesters. That's basically our current policy, right?
Yes, sir. Our policy codifies that, and I think state law also underscores that the use of force is, specific to situations where we're overcoming resistance, preventing escape, or effecting an arrest.
Correct. So for example, when the last president tried to clear a field to make a photo op of a group of people, blocking his way to a church, using the chemicals and whatever pepper spray and projectile to clear a field, that would not be possible under our current policy. Am I correct?
Correct. Absent violence, the use of force would require one of the conditions that I mentioned before.
Correct. Okay. Now, a follow-up question is regarding those foam projectiles you talked about. First, you mentioned, and I just want to clarify, this is only used for longer distance and not for short distance, correct?
Correct. The idea of those is essentially an impact weapon that can be used from a safe distance.
Right. Okay. Now, and when you use those, they are designed not to aim at people's head. For example, it might be used on the body for those other purposes we mentioned, like marking the individuals. Am I correct?
Correct. The use of the 40 millimeters is a less lethal. It's covered within our General Order 12.04. Deputies who are authorized to use it are required to complete a training program on it and then qualify annually. That includes training on target acquisition in the areas that should be targeted. It is designed very similar in terms of use as a baton. It's not designed for markings or for any other purposes that you mentioned.
It's not for marking, you said, right?
Correct.
Okay, good. Okay, when it comes to the tear gas grenades that we talk about, the various models, those were all supposed to never be used to shoot at any individual, correct?
That's correct.
Right, and the purpose of it is for crowd disbursement, so that they really should be also not used in a closed environment and only on open air environment, correct?
With the caveat that it's not to be used on peaceful protesters, but maybe Sergeant Stream can comment further.
Yeah, in regards to your first question, the grenades are not shot. Anyways, they're lobbed into the crowd and designed to just release the gas into the air to disperse the crowd. And then I'm sorry, what was your second question?
Oh, so you're saying that these are hand thrown, not off a launcher?
Well, you mentioned grenades, so I assume you mean the hand thrown.
Okay,
grenades.
sorry. Yeah, let me clarify. My bad. So on the hand thrown grenades, those are not supposed to be aimed at any individual. The idea of those is to be being launched into an area so that the chemical can be used to disperse the crowd, correct?
Yes, they're a canister and they're not an impact weapon. They're not thrown at people.
People, right? Okay, and then we have policy that basically state that in our training, correct?
Correct. They're not trained to be thrown at people.
Okay. Now, when it comes to the launching of the canister containing chemicals, whether we talk about CS or OC that we described, those are also not designed to be aimed at any individual, correct?
Are you referring to the ones that come out of the 40 millimeter?
How many do we have?
Somerville described that there was different munitions available.
Yeah, if you might be able to explain to us, I really appreciate it since we have a different types here to clarify. Thank you.
Okay, so to clarify, there are hand-thrown canisters,
Right?
which we described, and then there are also the 40 millimeter, like Sergeant Somerville described, is capable of the direct impact foam round, as well as a CS round or an OC round.
Right. And none of these that you just mentioned, whether CS round, OC round, and being launched, none of those are designed to be used on individuals, correct?
No, so they are an impact round as well. They can be used in much the same way as the foam round, but it also releases a small cloud of the chemical agent as an extra deterrent to gain compliance.
Right. And sorry.
I'm sorry, Supervisor, if I can add to that too, what we do have is we do have compressed air pellets that are aimed at a person that release OC. And they're pretty much like paintball guns, except instead of paint, it disperses the OC. That's another list of an item that we have. And I'm not sure if that was included in your question, but I wanted to make sure because those are actually directed at a person.
Oh, thank you very much, sir, for clarifying that. That's very, very helpful. So in general, the canisters that we talked about, whether it is using the lethal launcher, the less lethal launcher, or the other ones that we described previously, those are not aimed at individuals, but there are compressed air pellets, I guess it's like an air gun, that is used to aim at individuals, and that also has the ability to relieve some OC material. That's what you said, right?
Sir, I'd like to clarify on something you said there. So you have the hand-thrown canisters.
Correct.
And then the rounds that come out of the 40 millimeter launcher,
right?
They do also have a soft tip on them, and they can be targeted at people as an impact round, but also release the chemical agent as well. And those come out of the 40 millimeter less lethal launcher. And then the round that the sheriff is referring to is an entirely separate system.
Oh, I see. What are those called? I'm sorry.
The system that the sheriff is referring to is called an FN 303.
FN 303. And those are the ones that release compressed air pellets that also may release OC as well.
Correct. It's fired with compressed air.
Got it. Okay. And those are completely separate from rubber bullets, all right? Or are they the same thing?
Yeah, they're not rubber bullets.
Let me talk really briefly about rubber bullets. I think the perception of the public is that we have a firearm that instead of shooting a projectile that is made of metal, it's rubber. That's not. We have that foam tipped impact weapon, and we also have the compressed air type of projectiles that have OC in it. But rubber bullets is really a misnomer, I think, in the public's mind.
Excuse the interruption. How about beanbag rounds?
We do not have those.
Thank you. Excuse me, Supervisor Lee, didn't mean to intrude.
No, not at all. I'm glad you asked the question. I'm glad that we don't have them. So thank you very much, Chair Smithian. And then going to page 4 and 4C under packet, page 35, there are a couple of items that says federal custody only and not authorized for use as 6 gas guns. Can you explain what those are and why are they not authorized for use?
We're looking right now.
Thank you. Yes, under roll number 23, if that's at all helpful.
If I can answer that one, the federal gas gun was a similar gun like the 40mm launcher. It's a single shot launcher. It was a pistol. That one is currently not being used by custody staff. There's been a change in the use of force policy for custody, prohibiting the use of any primary striker fired weapon systems inside the custody setting.
So currently, those are literally not allowed under federal law. Am I correct?
Yeah, so sorry about that. So federal is the name of the manufacturer. It's not.
Oh, I see. Those are the manufacturer's name. Okay.
The reason that it's on the list is because it's something that we have, but it's no longer authorized for use.
I see. Okay. No, thank you for the comprehensive nature of listing them, even though we can't use them, but that's something we still have in our inventory. So thanks for including that. And then the other question I asked is the other two, which is the 37mm launcher as listed in number 20, the row 20 and row 24. Are those something similar? And what are those for, please?
So that 37mm launcher, the 6-shot Sage gun, it was the previous less lethal launcher that we had as an agency. Those have been decommissioned. The previous report had that we had 54 of those. Those have been sold, transferred to a licensed FFL. The 4 remaining that we have, I have 2 of them currently in my possession. They're decommissioned, they're not functioning, not working. And then Crowd Control has the other 2 that they no longer use as well.
Okay. And the plan is to basically get rid of them? Am I correct?
Yes, that's correct. The plan is to have them destroyed.
Great, thank you. How about the other 5 down at the bottom for 24?
Same thing. That was custody staff has the 37mm single shot launchers, but as previously stated, those ones are not authorized to be used. And currently we don't even have munitions for the 37mm.
Great, so we're in the process of also basically getting rid of them, right?
That's correct.
Thank you. Okay, no, thank you very much. This is very helpful and really appreciate the detailed explanation.
Thank you. Let me just follow up with a question, which is, there's been reference to general orders, there's been reference to policy. Are they one and the same, or is there a difference between what is characterized as a policy versus what is characterized as a general order?
They're interchangeable, sir. All of our primary policies are condensed into our general orders. And then there are some individual unit policies that may, for example, govern crowd control.
All right, and the general orders are ultimately the responsibility of the sheriff, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And they are subject to change by the sheriff pursuant to the sheriff's authority, you know, at any time, yes?
That's correct. And we're in the process of doing a major modification to our general orders and policies, and we contracted with a firm that really is an expert in this area. Yes, they're modified as laws change, as we believe that there needs to be policy changes, correct.
Thank you. And I'll get into that a little bit more in our next section with the folks from OCLIM. But we do have the motion on the floor from Supervisor Lee, and the second from me. We've heard from speakers. Thank you all to those who participated in this part of the agenda, and we'll ask the clerk now to call the roll.
Vice Chairperson Lee.
Aye.
Chairperson Simitian.
Aye. And thank you. I am hoping that the expansive nature of this first part of this motion carries 2-0. I'm hoping that the expansive nature of this conversation allows us to be a little bit quicker with the remaining portions. I know we have a hard stop at 12:30, and I want to make sure that we have ample time for the sheriff and her team when we get to their items. So Mr. Giannacco, with that gentle prompt, if I could ask you to go ahead and provide your report, this would be the time.
Thank you, Supervisor Simidian, Supervisor Lee. Good to see you. Appreciate the opportunity, and I will present the report that you have. Just a verbal overview from now
And-
what I think should be.
Excuse the
20
interruption. When you reference the report that we have, again, because this has been continued from time to time, could you describe the report to which you refer, just so everybody's using the same document that's current?
Yes, sir. It is entitled Sheriff's Office Use of Military Style Equipment, Lethal and Less Lethal Armaments, Current Policies and Recommended Revisions.
Thank you.
And Chair Simidian, as your prompt, I will present my remarks at a 30,000 instead of 10,000 foot level, but certainly be available for questions. The report that I've referenced is intended to further respond to an initial recommendation that I believe you made as an initial referral last summer, Supervisor Simidian. And those were 10 items. But one of the items that was included in the 10 was consideration of banning or limiting the use of tear gas and rubber bullets as a crowd control technique. And so this report is intended to be further responsive to that referral per the committee's request. The issue of whether to use and under what conditions to use both less lethal munitions and tear gas is something that I think has consumed policing and law enforcement over the past year almost as much as any other issue. After the George Floyd murder, there were protests throughout the country about that incident and a larger narrative about concerns about police uses of excessive force. Those protests garnered serious publicity and created a national narrative that has resulted in many issues of police reform. But one of the issues coming out of that was in these protest situations, the use of tear gas was deployed in a way that is probably unprecedented. The protests also resulted in the use of less lethal armaments, again in a way that is probably unprecedented. Jurisdictions that had never had tear gas deployed at all ever in the history of their cities were suddenly in a situation in which tear gas was deployed, as an example. Less lethal munitions were deployed, and in numerous jurisdictions, injuries were suffered by individuals, some who were not violent protesters, and have in fact resulted in concerns, liability, accountability, and other issues. So we were not surprised to see the referral and the recommendation here last summer to consider banning or limiting the use of tear gas and rubber bullets, which are really a better way to characterize them, or less lethal munitions, as a crowd control technique. So what our report is intended to do is to talk about the issues. I can just cut to the chase to say that based on our experience, based on our knowledge of the different initiatives that are going on in California and throughout the country, we do not believe that it is appropriate at this time to ban the use of less lethal munitions in crowd control context. We do not believe it is appropriate and is not our recommendation to ban the use of tear gas for crowd control. But we do believe that it would be helpful and appropriate and provide better guidance to deputies in the county to have more guidance in policy about when those kinds of munitions were to be used in a crowd control context. And we're not talking about custody context. We're not talking about an individual who is armed with a knife where less lethal would be a good way of not having to go to lethal, but in order to disarm or to neutralize the threat. And we're not talking about that context at all. All our recommendations are intended to do are to focus on what guidance should be provided to deputies in a crowd control context with regard to the use of these munitions. And our recommendation with regard to less lethal is essentially to provide better guidance and to provide more restrictions on the use of less lethal munitions in a crowd control context. Currently, the Sheriff's Department, the Sheriff's Office does have some guidance, and that's already been discussed in this conversation that we've had today. It is correct that there is policy currently in the general orders that instructs deputies that nonviolent or peaceful protesters should not be subject to less lethal munitions in a crowd control context. Of course, that is an easy question. No one would expect that peaceful protesters would be subject to less lethal munitions under any circumstance. So with regard to guidance, it doesn't do enough in our view with regard to that guidance, because what about a protester who is violating curfew? What about a protester who has violated a dispersal order given because of concerns about the nature of the activity during the protest? And then more significantly, what about a protester who is involved in vandalism or property destruction or other kinds of activity that would be considered potentially violent and certainly is not peaceful? And the question then is what kind of guidance is provided with regard to the current policy, the current language with regard to that situation. And so what we have suggested is a more definitive policy and guidance with regard to crowd control situations. And what we have modeled our suggested language after is the current policy of the San Jose Police Department. San Jose Police Department was by far the largest protest in the county following the George Floyd murder. The Sheriff's Office did respond to that request for mutual aid by the police department. Sheriff's Office members were on the scene and were providing assistance in a very helpful way. And based on San Jose's experience, within a week of that days of protest activity, violence, injuries to protesters, etc., Chief Garcia, who was the chief at the time, changed the police department's policy to provide more guidance to his officers with regard to when less lethal munition should be used in a crowd control context. And his new policy, which is now almost a year old, does two things. It instructs officers that less lethal munitions in crowd control context should not be used unless the individual upon who it is intended to be used is engaged in assaultive activity. And it carves out that exception. It doesn't ban it, but it says if an individual is involved in assaultive activity, then you can use less lethal munitions on that individual. The second thing it does, and this is unique to crowd control, is in a crowd control situation when you have a mix, and you often do have a mix of individuals who are being violent and individuals who are just purely there to exercise their First Amendment activity and to be nonviolent and peaceful. But sometimes they're right next to each other in a protest situation. And so what the policy instructs officers to do in San Jose now is that under those conditions, that before they deploy less lethal, even on an assaultive individual, they've got to make sure that the backdrop is clear. They've got to make sure that that the less lethal munitions will not inadvertently strike other individuals who are not being violent. And if in fact there is no ability to clear the field, to clear their backdrop in a way where that won't happen, then they're not authorized to use less lethal. Those two elements of the policy that we recommend, which is San Jose's policy, do not exist in the sheriff's office policy. There's not that type of specificity in policy. The other reason we look to San Jose's policy as a guide is the fact that oftentimes that most likely, if you look at the past, most likely future protests will happen in San Jose. So why not have the two largest law enforcement offices on the same page with regard to the guidance in these areas, since most likely they will be working together? And why have two different differing guidance with regard to these two agencies when they are working together? That is the reason for the recommendation. The second recommendation has to do with tear gas and when it can be deployed. And again, we believe that there are going to be times in which tear gas would be an effective dispersal mechanism in crowd control. But we believe that those times should be rare, those times should be deliberately and considered, and those decisions on deployment should be made at the highest level of an organization. And again, not necessarily the sergeant on scene who decides we need to deploy tear gas, not even the incident commander, but really the highest level of the law enforcement organization should be making a decision about whether deployment of tear gas is appropriate. And again, we look to, again, other jurisdictions that have thought through these issues and have considered this. So, for example, in the state of Washington, there is a law about to become law that does this very thing. And it requires that before tear gas is going to be deployed in Seattle or Olympia or in King County, that the highest individual involved either in law enforcement or elected official in some cities make that decision. So we used that analogy, which we think is a good one and presents a good compromise between banning its use altogether and requiring that decision be made at the highest level of the agency. So in the sheriff's office situation, if the sheriff herself is on duty, we think that before that decision is made, that the recommendation should be passed to her, and that decision should be made by her. Obviously, if she's not on duty, then it would go to the undersheriff, et cetera, et cetera. But those are our recommendations. I'm going to end here. Certainly subject to any questions and available for any questions the Supervisor Midian or Supervisor Lee you may have.
Thank you. I'll do this briskly, Mr. Giannacco. Just to be clear, because initially your language caught my attention, and then I think I subsequently got clarification. The policy changes that you are recommending are changes that were in use in San Jose as a result of amendments after the incidents a year ago and in response to challenges with those incidents, yes?
Yes, sir.
All right. And then let me just ask the sheriff and her department if they're prepared to comment today, and if not, what your thinking is about adopting policies consistent with those that are suggested by Mr. Giannacco and apparently have recently been adopted by the city of San Jose.
I cover many of those things in the prepared remarks that I have under our item number 6, and I think I can address those. I agree with some. I disagree strongly about others.
Okay. we'll wait until we get to item 6 then. Why don't I, because I want to make sure there's adequate time for the sheriff's presentation, I'm going to turn to Supervisor Lee and withhold any questions until after we've heard from the sheriff. Thank you again, Mr. Giannakko.
Thank you, Chair Simitian. I just have a few questions, actually. Really looking at the staff report back under attachment D as proposed, I actually would like to request for the county council to come back to the HXC in the August meeting with a draft ordinance or policy regarding the acquisition of both lethal, less lethal, and military style equipment. And I would also like for the county council to work with staff to define what would be an acceptable urgent circumstances to acquire these equipment without the board approval due to the exigent circumstances, have it reflected in this draft ordinance policy. Lastly, I would like to request staff through procurement to work with relevant departments and pursue a more competitive purchasing process with regard to quality, time, and cost considerations. And those are my comments. I just also want to thank Mr. Giannakko for a very comprehensive report that highlighted the differences between the San Jose new policy and how we might be able to improve ours. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, then why don't we ask Mr. Giannakko and anyone else, if they're participating from Oakland, to stay with us through the next item, obviously. But otherwise, I'm going to ask if there's a motion to receive the report from Supervisor Lee. There is.
Yes, so moved.
I will second. And that motion comes with the direction to provide the information that Supervisor Lee requested. Let me just check with the clerk.
Clarification with regard to the motion, please.
Certainly, Mr. Williams, go right ahead.
I'm not sure I quite understood the request from Supervisor Lee with what you're asking County Council to come back with in August.
Sure. Let me repeat this. I'm looking at a draft ordinance or policy regarding the regulating the acquisition of both lethal, less lethal, and military style equipment. That would also listing separately the type of urgent circumstances, right, the exigent circumstances, whereby it will no longer be required for the board approval because of the urgency, and have that reflected in here, like the exception to that rule. So I would like to.
Mr. Williams, excuse the interruption, Supervisor Lee. Mr. Williams, Supervisor Lee, given some of the jurisdictional issues here, Mr. Williams and Supervisor Lee, would it work better if it was an off-agenda report and confidential to the limited degree that that was necessary?
Yeah, we certainly could do that. And the reason I was seeking clarification is earlier in the meeting, I think there was comment about, in light of AB 481, holding off on pursuing a standalone policy until we see what state legal framework we are required to operate under. We will certainly do, the direction of the board. I'm just trying to use time and resources efficiently and effectively. And it is my recommendation to the committee that we wait on proceeding with the considerable time and resources involved until there is clarity around whether there will be a state imposed framework, which, like I said, has cleared one house already. And we will know that definitively in a matter of months. And so that's my recommendation. We will, of course, the will of the board.
And again, Supervisor Lee, I think we could make some progress in this direction with Mr. Williams's assistance, perhaps by threading the needle with an off-agenda report that is, to a limited degree, again, confidential as appropriate or necessary. But that would at least mean that when we looked at the matter later in the year, we had a bit of a head start in our thinking and understanding. Does that work for you, Supervisor Lee?
Yeah, certainly. I think that's very reasonable, especially in light of the fact that if the legislation were to pass or the governor signs in October, then certainly it's a different framework. So I don't want the attorney of county council to go through a lot of work. So I think off agenda report would be great. First of all. Second is I do want to make sure that we that the direction was clear regarding procurement. The second part of my suggestion to have procurement work with relevant departments to pursue a more competitive purchasing process with regard to the quality, time, and cost consideration. And if that could proceed, I would appreciate it.
This is Gene Clark. Absolutely, Supervisor. I understand.
Great.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Williams, does that get us to yes?
Sounds good.
Thank you, sir. All right. Do we have any speakers on this item looking to the clerk?
We do.
And how many may I ask?
One, I apologize.
Go right ahead.
Our first speaker is Urvish. I've unmuted you. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much to the Board of Supervisors. I want to, first of all, emphasize the requirement of the military equipment and as well as the selection of a personnel to consider the deployment scenario and the type of ammunition. And any departmental approved requires ammunition to be used with the shotguns. There has to be a consideration of a deployment scenarios with the shotguns, such as a SWAT team, members versus the personnel for the entry of purpose. Also to verify that the risk of the tools to support the shotgun. Also, some of the policies like having a verbal warning before utilizing the equipments, advisement to the officers, preparation of an SWAT team, and protective clothing such as gloves, safety glasses, all the PPE, personal protective equipments while utilizing the shotguns. It is to be make sure that the purpose of the shotguns within the civilian area are to be defined and are to be make sure that to be utilized within the appropriate jurisdiction. The weapon opportunity is to be considered only with the policy. Lethal weapon to be used with the compliance with the use of force policy. Storage of those shotguns is to be always be with the school resource officer. Documentation requirement always to be with the officers before discharging any equipments with the police report that how the shotguns, grenades, any type of equipment purchase with the military approval, military service equipment approval are to be required as well. Any specific.
That concludes our request to speak.
All right, thank you very much. Then we will call the roll on this item, which is simply to receive the report with the direction provided per Supervisor Lee.
Vice Chairperson Lee.
Aye.
Chairperson Smidian.
Aye, thank you. Motion passes. All right, that takes us now to the next item, which is on our agenda as agenda item 6, and that is to receive the report from the Office of the Sheriff. So let me turn to the Sheriff and her department.
Thank you. This item is very, very important to every member of the Sheriff's Office. And I know that 4/5 of the meeting has already gone by and that my time is limited, but I do hope I have the opportunity to show our position. It is very, very critical. This, just as a point of note, is this hearing was scheduled for May 26th, which less than a month ago, but it was postponed because of the tragic murders of our coworkers, our county family members at VTA. We're seeing more and more active shooters lately. In Cupertino in 2011, 3 were murdered at Lehigh, and there was a manhunt for the suspect in that one, and our patrol people found the suspect the very next day. But within the last 2 years, in this county alone, there's been 3 mass murder incidents. The Gilroy Garlic Festival, where 3 were murdered, the Ford store, where 3 were murdered, and VTA, where 9 were murdered. Everyone knows that we released a copy of some of the body-worn camera data from that. But I think it's really, really important when we talk about munitions and training and equipment that we have to really focus on what our deputies need to do their job. The video that I'm going to show today will be just a small excerpt, I promise, will show several things. One, using the vehicle as a shield as we approach the exterior staircase where the suspect was believed to be on the 3rd floor. We have ballistic panels in the doors of our vehicles, and that was what we used. We knew we had to get there quickly before we could take the time to get other armaments. That you'll see that. You will also see that as the VTA employees are leaving, we're trying to get more information. Where is he? What is he doing? Some of the information we gave said building A. Some of the information said building B. In another scene, you'll see a deputy breaching a door. We had to breach several doors in this, and they were using a fire extinguisher. You'll also see, as we're going into this large room, you'll see our deputies approaching with their rifles. And you'll hear someone say clear right. That means that they've already looked at all of the offices on the right, and you'll hear the other people say hold left. That means that they hadn't cleared that much larger area. As you see that, you'll hear 3 shots and see our deputies move quickly toward the threat. The 3 shots, the first shot that you hear came into, went through the door of the building that our deputies were approaching. And the next 2 shots were the suspect killing himself. And if I can just show those really quick compilations to see how important training and equipment is.
Please do.
Thank you.
I think like a handgun, like a 9mm. He went right into that building right there. He went towards the back. A lot of people are coming out that way now.
Edward 7, subject's possibly armed with a handgun.
All right, let's just go. Let's go. Ready?
Let's go.
Go. We're in a good guy.
Where's the break room at? Where's the break room?
Break room in front of the building.
Reaching.
There it is. I'm clear right. Come with me.
Not clear. Hold left. Hold it. We'll hold left.
Damn. I'm clear right. Guys, push up. Hey, we need that key card over here, bro.
All right, I'll push it back to you guys, okay?
Yeah.
Which one you need? Door right behind us.
Oh, shit.
We can stay with this. We can stay with this. 3rd floor. That's right, 3rd floor.
Conference room?
Thank you. This tragedy does not really focus on the impact on the families of the victims, and 2 of our staff were close family members of 2 of the victims. It's also important to note that deputies are impacted by each of these events. Those that have never been required to risk their lives really have no concept of the personal and emotional impact. We have brave, intelligent, and caring people who understand the risks of their job. And even when facing fear, they perform as they've been trained. We clearly saw this in this one video alone, and it's really as a result of our positive training and equipment, and we'll continue to advocate for the equipment that we need in this type of situation and in crowd control situations. This was a tragic loss of life that really impacts us deeply, but we know that our actions save lives. Suspect had 3 handguns, multiple rounds, high capacity magazines, and bomb explosive material at his residence. After Columbine, our sheriff's office recommended the development of an active shooter protocol. And in 2001, we implemented this countywide protocol. And this was really a change of thinking in law enforcement. We went from a defensive posture like they took in Columbine to really being to an offensive posture. In Columbine, we know that everyone waited outside until the active shooter. Our 2001 policy said as soon as there's one deputy or multiple deputies, you go in and immediately confront the threat. In about 2015, we implemented a new policy and we incorporated into that policy the rescue component. We developed this along with County Fire and provided train the trainer to all fire and law enforcement agencies. The premise on this was that law enforcement would have basic life-saving equipment and remove the victim to the warm zone where they could receive additional care from fire and EMS. EMS is equipped, County Fire and other fire departments are equipped with ballistic helmets and vests also, and this should never be considered military equipment. In this DTA incident, our rescue portion of this active shooter protocol was very important. We carried and extricated 3 people from that building, 2 victims and the suspect. We didn't know he was the suspect at the time. And we provided basic first aid. In fact, one of our deputies is credited with applying a chest seal that kept him alive and got to the hospital. His family was able to be with him before he succumbed to the injuries he received during this incident. These are county employees. Excuse me. These are county employees. These are your people. And we see over and over criticism of our sheriff's office people who are county employees. You are responsible for the safety of your employees just as we are and the public that you serve. I understand that's my job, to provide the best quality staff, to provide them with the very best training and equipment. They need to, so they can respond to the very next critical incident and return home safe to their families. We actually have people leaving our agency for this reason. Our staff are watching this. This is very important. They're watching this meeting and they've watched all past meetings. They know that the sheriff's office is very often criticized by other county entities. Our job is difficult, but it's more difficult to be continually undermined, criticized, second-guessed by those who have no understanding of the complexities or the dangers in the field. I believe that praise for our staff is very often warranted, but little or none is given. I didn't hear that today. Supervisor Lee did thank us for his recognition on our need for less lethal. And I want to thank him for that. He has a background in the military and probably of all supervisors can understand these types of risks our people are under every day. According to the FBI statistics, in the first 5 months of this year alone, 27 officers were murdered with firearms. We're seeing more and more guns on the street, more and more violent crime. Everyone's aware of that. And we're asking more of our people, and they deserve better. We need additional budget allocations for more training and more equipment. Locally, there's also been a significant increase in weapon-related crimes in Sheriff's Office jurisdiction. From May 2019 until May, comparing May 2019 to this year, there's been a 22% increase in convicted felons in possession of a firearm, a 45% increase at firing at inhabited dwellings or vehicles, and a 50% increase in attempted murder. I mentioned earlier about the 1033 program, and I won't go into that, but it's important to note that this is free equipment. It's equipment that's going to be discontinued by the military. I hope that even if you do evaluate the type of equipment, I hope that this is something that's not close to us. We need to be good guardians of public money. We also talk a lot about First Amendment right, and that is something that's first and foremost in all of our minds. Excuse me. The most basic and fundamental component of freedom is the right of freedom of speech. The freedom allows individuals to express themselves without interference or constraint from government. We do not support and will not tolerate any branch of our government, including law enforcement, taking any action to prevent or impede this kind of fundamental right. With that said, the freedom of speech does not include the right to incite actions that would harm others, including peace officers who are trying to protect this very important freedom. When individuals assemble together to express, to express themselves, and that expression turns into an unlawful act or violent, it becomes a crime. So as far as item number 4 is concerned, as Mr. Williams talked about, it was a report relating to the funding, acquiring, and use of military-style equipment, lethal and less lethal armaments, and options for implementing a policy regulating the funding and/or acquisitions of military-style equipment by the county. I talked earlier about the definition of a military-style equipment, both lethal and non-lethal. We disagree with many of the items that have been put on this list. Armored vehicles in an active shooter situation and many other situations where a rescue is required, it's also important that we protect our staff. I would argue that this is safety equipment and not military style. I question why the term military style is used. Why, if it's used in military, should it not be a law enforcement application? We need to identify military style equipment and duty equipment. Not everything is essential safety equipment. Some is offensive equipment. Using offensive tools are really used for the defense of a particular act. I think it's important to note, and James Williams did mention this in reviewing the settlements and judgments from the Sheriff's Office and the Department of Correction, that there were no settlements, no payouts of using military style equipment. One of the options in item 4 is prior to acquiring military style equipment, a department would be required to submit information on the proposed acquisition and board approval for the acquisition. I ask, what would happen if we requested something and the board denied that purchase? Supervisor Smitty, you made very clear on June 15th, when you stated, I do, however, want to reference again, as we have from time to time, California Government Code 25303, which specifically provides as a matter of state law that the Board of Supervisors shall supervise the official conduct of all county officers. And particularly insofar as these functions and duties relate to success in collecting safety equipment or dispersing public funds. I've been a cop for almost 48 years. I listen to our people and I know what we need to perform our duties. And those are duties that we have taken an oath to uphold. I also continue to hear the word transparency, a concept that I fully support and have never balked at. But it's important to note that all purchases done by the Sheriff's Office, and I think that County Procurement covered this very, very clearly, it is all public record. It follows the public process. Procurement has extensive policies. It's difficult sometimes to expedite purchases because of policies. I understand why they're in place, but I don't advocate putting additional functions in place that where we have a further review. I think it's adequate. James Williams also mentioned, and I agree with this, that there currently is a bill that is pending. So getting to the OIR report, it is a bit confusing, and I do have some concerns. Referenced in his report, he says that, again, Supervisor Smitty, you recommended banning the use of tear gas and rubber bullets as a crowd control technique. I talked about the misnomer of rubber bullets earlier, and the fact that we have the compressed air type things like paintball and the system. So I think that that's an important distinction to make. I'm not going to address the entire report, but I find one of the recommendations as particularly problematic. There are many problems with the report, and I won't go into that now. But one of the recommendations is the sheriff's office should restrict the use of less lethal munitions in a First Amendment context to individuals who are not actively assaulting officers or third parties, and advise deputies of the need to consider backdrop issues prior to deployment. Backdrop is something that we train all the time in this organization. It's always taught, it's regularly considered. And I know of no incident in this organization where backdrop and action taken by the sheriff's office was any kind of a problem. When he references in this First Amendment, if he's talking about a peaceful demonstration, we've already talked about our policies and how in a peaceful demonstration, we don't have a problem and will not use any kind of force, both by law and by policy. The biggest problem with this particular recommendation is, again, not use less lethal munitions unless that someone is actively assaulting an officer or another person. I think this is absolutely ludicrous. And let me tell you why I think that. Again, not unless they're actively assaulting. I want to remind everybody about the storming of the Capitol building. Does anyone really believe that in a case like that, where they're storming a building, that we should not use less lethal munitions, even when someone is not being assaulted? You know, some of the protesters at the Capitol were nonviolent, but that did not mean that the Capitol Police did not need to disperse that crowd. If someone is being actively assaulted, absolutely we can use less lethal and in some cases lethal, but do not prohibit us from using less lethal munitions if there is not an active threat. If this is recommended and adopted, this particular recommendation, I will not support it. I understand that there is a tacit threat of withholding funds if we don't adopt what the board recommends. But we are really fortunate that we do have some board members who are sensible and understand the true realities, and board members who fully support our extremely professional organization and our people. You know, and I ask the question, what do you think we should do if this recommendation was adopted? What do you really think we should do if a crowd storms the county building? Not use any less lethal munitions? Remember, you defined batons as less lethal also. You know, I hope that there is a lot of respect for the quality and bravery of our deputies. They do the right thing when acting with considerable risk. We talked a little bit about policies, so I'll skip over this really quickly, but our policies conform with state law and with our positions. We talked about the First Amendment and how we will not use any kind of force of any type on First Amendment lawful protests. I mentioned we're in the process of transitioning post the state agency recently issued an updated crowd management and intervention and control guidelines for publication. We're currently evaluating and will likely lead to updated training policy too. Our policies already meet your recommendations, and our philosophy, training, deployment, approaches, and agency already aligns or surpasses the spirit of recommendation. However, we're not opposed We are not opposed to sending out another directive to our staff, reiterating these points that are already in process. We will do that. We want to comply with some of the recommendations that are reasonable. Our policies have always, certainly adhere to our philosophies in state law. And our goal has always been to use additional tactics and equipment. There should be an increase in less lethal options in order to avoid the use of lethal force. At a time when you're trying to limit and control armaments, and particularly less lethal, I actually think it's more responsible to provide additional less tools. We will be asking the board to approve more funding for training and equipment. We will also bring forward a request for a taser type tool also to add to our less lethal. And yes, we will also be presenting a policy at the same time. Our deputies want options, and the public deserves to have the best staff who are well-trained and have adequate tools to address any type of situation. Our staff's begging for additional tools, equipment, and training, especially those less lethal options. We require and train in de-escalation. Do not limit our resources and how we're able to deal with the threat. Any decision should be well crafted and should be dictated by those who are experts in the field. And I'm happy to answer any questions. The one thing that I would also like to mention, and I've introduced the people earlier, one thing I'd like to mention is I hope that any report back done by county council that you have deemed to be in whole or in part confidential, I really hope that that report is also provided to the sheriff's office. When you're discussing this, we have the experts. We face this every day. I'm asking for your consideration and understanding the complexities, danger, and the absolute heroics displayed every day by our staff. I have nothing further, and I'm happy to take questions.
Supervisor Lee, any questions?
Thank you, Chair Simonian. First of all, Sheriff, thanks so much for showing the video. And before I make any questions, I just want to repeat my previous statement and my wholehearted appreciation of the professionalism, bravery, and courage shown by our deputy sheriffs, not only at the VTA mass shooting, but of everyday lives. We've heard stories of patrol officers sitting around and there are folks out there shooting at them. Those things are not only disheartening, it's absolutely outrageous. And I just want to make sure all rank and files hear that from me directly, that I absolutely support the hard work and truly understand the work that they do every day. That every day they leave work, they are praying to make sure they get home safely. And I understand that truly, completely. I mean, we talk about, for example, the hate crime that was going over in our community. And I've said to people, when you start hitting people, spitting at folks, hate crime is no freedom of speech. Okay, and that's not tolerable. And I appreciate our sheriff's support at the various rallies. I've seen the team coming out and how important this is to show our community that our sheriff, our uniform members are all supporting to keep us all safe. So I just want to say, first of all, thank you very, very much for that. Second, I do want to mention regarding the issue of armored vehicles to protect our staff, the use of any type of ballistic, shielding and all that in our police vehicles, bulletproof items or vests. Those are absolutely important to keep our staff safe. So certainly I have no issues on that. And the idea of there are purchases that need to be expedited due to certain circumstances, I certainly did understand those, and that's why I kind of mentioned it during my earlier comment. That being said, I do want to ask if you could help explain a little bit more, because the way OIR report came through, there were so-called 2 recommendations, right? Let me go on the second one first. I know you have issues on the first one. The second one talks about when it comes to using the tear gas, that the highest ranking sheriff official on duty should be the one giving that order Is that recommendation something that you find objectionable? Or you think that's something that would be workable in your office?
Thank you, Supervisor. And I really want to thank you for your comment on our staff. They're listening, they hear it, they appreciate just the smallest things. So thank you so much. In terms of the next recommendation, it's something that I think that we can work with. I was present during the entire VTA incident, and I can tell you that I was not determining the tactics. Sitting next to me is Lieutenant Simonson, who was the tactical commander. I think that it has to be the highest ranking person that is there. And I know in this recommendation, you were referencing crowd control only, and that is already in our policy where it has to be approved before the deployment, for instance, of gas. That is already in our policy, but very often I'm the highest ranking person at the scene, and those are the judgments that I really should not and cannot adequately make unless I'm right there on the front line. So I think we can work with this recommendation.
Great, thank you. So I just want to clear that up. So that's something that's workable. On the first one, I think you raised a very, very good point regarding crowds storming a building, for example, which is not included in this recommendation. And is there any type of amendment to the recommendation you might want to make? We don't have to do it necessarily today, but is this something that we think you might be able to work with to come back to us? Because if the city of San Jose has adopted a policy, I certainly do think there might be some benefits for us to have a policy similar to theirs. And correct me if I'm wrong on my understanding, please.
Well, thank you. I'm not sure as it's written if it really can be modified, because in concept, I think that we need to use less lethal and sometimes lethal when people are actively assaulting officers or other parties. So I believe that our policies are adequate. I mentioned that we certainly will reinforce the points made by the OIR report, because there are several good points. We will reinforce that to our staff, and we're continuing to monitor state law because this is changing. It's not just it's just not the County of Santa Clara, but certainly the state of California and throughout the nation. There are changes. There are very positive changes in the response to civil unrest, the response to active shooter, and law enforcement generally. And I think many of those changes are good. But let's listen to the experts. I think as it's written here, I cannot suggest just modifying the recommendation. Also, we were on the front line, Sergeant Stream with the crowd control unit. Sergeant Stream was actually hit by things being thrown at our deputies. And the decision was made by people there. We also, when we were assigned to a San Jose incident as mutual aid, the first thing that we do is, what is your rule of engagement? What is the premise that you're operating at? I have not read San Jose's policy, but if it says that we can only use less lethal munitions only when there's an active assault happening, I would disagree with San Jose's policy. We were there. We, during that incident, I don't believe had any complaints from any public members and everything. Our deputies do their job professionally every time. San Jose is an exceptional agency that had a major part in our VTA shooting. We work together as agencies, but our policies rarely align completely other than countywide protocol. Each organization themselves should determine their policies, and certainly take input is what we're always looking for.
Thank you, and I'm glad you mentioned that the policy on San Jose, and I myself have not read it. I know Oakland might have gone through it in more detail. My I guess suggestion here would be, be worthwhile probably for your office or to reveal this, so that in the future, I think in terms of developing policies, if modification of any that's needed, that we could see if there's similarities. And I do think that when it comes to deployment, the rules of engagement is different from two agencies. It's confusing for the officers. So I think if there's any way we can actually make it more uniform, I think that certainly has benefit to it as well. Thank you. And that's all the questions I have for now.
Thank you, Supervisor Lee. I understand that our time constraints today are in part a function of the fact that there's another committee meeting and the clerk staff needs to be available to them. But I want to turn next to Mr. Giannacco to see if he has any thoughts to share on the presentation from the sheriff and her department.
Yeah, in the interest of time, I appreciate the sheriff's comments. I just indicate that the city of San Jose, which is the one who has been through it the most, had a week of demonstrations and protests and violence. Now, in retrospect, as part of that review process, decided to provide further guidance to its officers with regard to the use of less lethal and crowd control based on that experience. And, I would just say that. And then the only other thing I would add, Supervisor Simitian, is the reference to the storming of the Capitol is not applicable to the recommendation. Our recommendation is dealing with First Amendment activity, a protest situation, not the storming of a building. The storming of a building is different and wouldn't be applicable to the recommendation that we've made here. That's all I'm going to say at this point, Supervisor.
All right, then. Thank you. Supervisor Lee, any more comments or questions at this point?
Thank you, Chair. I actually have no further questions.
All right. Mr. Giannacco, any further comments or questions?
No, Supervisor, but as you know, offline, I'm always available for either you or Supervisor Lee. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And let me just turn to Mr. Williams or Dr. Smith. I just, since they've been part of the conversation today.
Nothing further from me. Thank you.
Dr. Smith, anything?
Nothing further that I can add at this time.
All right, let me go back to the Sheriff's Department, make sure that they have a final opportunity to comment. I understand we have a little bit of additional wiggle room on time from the clerk's office. My appreciation to them for trying to make that work. Sheriff, anything else from you in your shop?
No.
All right, then Supervisor Lee, do we have a motion to receive the report? Forgive me, I can't recall if I've just gotten that from you or not.
No, I'll be happy to make that motion. Thank you.
All right, and I will second. Let me check with the clerk and see if we have any outstanding requests from speakers.
We do not.
All right, then. We will call the roll.
Vice Chairperson Lee.
Aye.
Chairperson Simitian.
Aye. Thank you all very much for your participation today. It has certainly been an illuminating conversation in a great many respects. And with that, we'll say thank you and wish you all well. Be safe. Take care.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.